Join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Mayor Bailey?
Here.
Mr. Bateman?
Here.
Mr. Blair?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Here.
Mr. Ping?
Here.
Welcome, everyone. With us here tonight, we have our Director of Finance, Mark Medler, Assistant City Manager, Corey Wright, Clerk of Council, Misty Brent, City Manager, Dave Kennedy, City Solicitor, Joe Braun, Safety Director, Sue Madsen, our Sergeant-at-Arms, Lieutenant Amy Campbell. Also with us tonight, we have former council members Neil Ori, Todd Osborne, and Pat Mays. And I thought I saw CC, the President of the Little Miami River Chamber Alliance, sneak in. Thank you all for being here. Before we go any further, I believe Ms. Brents, as the Clerk of Council, has a letter to read on behalf of Tim Butler.
Dear Misty, the demands of a full-time job, a family business, and the responsibilities of a member of City Council have proven to be taxing on my physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional health. As a cancer survivor with ongoing medical after effects, I have made the difficult decision that something must be sacrificed. I regretfully advise you that effective May 9th, 2022 at 5 p.m., I am resigning my position on Loveland City Council. I make this decision after much prayer, consideration, and consultation with my family and those whose judgment and advice I trust. To those in the community who would seek to blame the remaining members of City Council, I can assure you that I do not blame them, and they are not responsible for my decision to resign. The decision comes from a result of my personal situation, as well as my own mistakes and actions. I want to thank our citizens who have supported me during my years on council. I wish continued success and all God's blessings on the City of Loveland, her citizens, and council. Respectfully, Tim Butler.
Thank you, Ms. Brent. I think I'll turn to Mr. Braun now for just sort of give us a little summation of what happens now with to fill that seat.
Yeah, under our charter, we have 45 days. Council has 45 days to make an appointment. In the event that they don't do so in that time period, the mayor has the power to make that appointment. I know Ms. Brent and I have had a communication, and I believe that past tradition has been that resumes are collected. Misty, do you know the time frame for that?
I think council usually decides.
Yeah, so you might want to...
We're going to say a June 1st deadline. Okay, so on behalf of council and the city, I would like to thank Mr. Butler for his time on council and certainly wish him well and respect his decision. All right, we have a few presentations to make. First is the Louis G. Rockwood Community Service Volunteer Award. The Rockwood Award seeks to recognize the time and accomplishments of volunteers serving the city. So with that, I would ask Councilman Andy Bateman and Jan Beller to please meet at the podium. We should give her that body.
Good, I'm glad you're here.
You want me to read the nomination for Jan. So the Rockwood Award, the Louis G. Rockwood Community Service Volunteer Award, seeks to recognize the time and accomplishments of volunteers serving the city. And Jan, for over 2 decades, Jan Beller has served as director of the Loveland Museum Center and has been doing the diligent work of collecting, preserving, and sharing Loveland's history for even longer as a charter member of the Greater Loveland Historical Society and Museum. Jan's dedication to our city's history draws from her family's deep roots in the East Loveland neighborhood. At the Historical Society, she has served as a constant and vital bridge from one board to another as the organization seeks to retain the vitality from which it was born in 1974. She has either contributed to or led significant improvements to the Museum Center's campus, such as the restoration of the 1797 Rich Log Cabin, the Bishop Coleman Gazebo, the Joanne Richardson History House, and Nisbet Library, and last year's World War II Honor Roll. Since 2018, stemming from several years laying the groundwork with our city manager, Jan has served on the Historic Preservation and Planning Commission as the designated representative from the local Historical Society. With the historic district and guidelines in place, the City of Loveland now officially aligns with many of the values and ideals of the Historical Society. And as both entities have benefited greatly from Jan's leadership and example, the 2022 Louis G. Rockwood Community Service Volunteer Award seems an appropriate honor. So on behalf of the City of Loveland, I'd like to present this to you in honor of your contributions to the city.
I want to especially thank Andy for writing that beautiful speech, and he took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to share a little of that. Now I don't have to, so you don't have to listen to it again. I'll add one thing, however, that yes, I live on the family property where my grandmother grew up as a little girl, and so it's been in the family name, and I'm going to use that, my maiden name, the A.B. and A.C. Brock. My great-grandfather and grandfather started a couple of the early businesses in Loveland, the hardware store, the lumber mill, and of course the hardware store is now where Eads Fence is. And he actually has some pictures from there. And since my grandmother was kind of a historian herself, she saved so many things of the past. She labeled everything. She actually put names on pictures and dates. I have scrapbooks full of some of the early community members, and lots of information that's been, of course, given to the Historical Society over years. So I think history and preservation is in my DNA. It has to be, because I'm doing everything I can to save my property instead of having houses built all over it. So anyway, again, I thank you, and I especially thank my current board and other volunteers who've supported me over the last year, since I'm way past retirement age. I'm hanging in there. And also a thank you for Dave Kennedy. He was a delight to work with. When he first came here, he talked about a preservation committee, and well, it took quite a long time for it to happen, but it finally did. And I appreciate his doing that. So thank you, and it's an honor to have received this award.
Let's get a picture with the council.
Yeah, you know.
Where do you want me?
Just right here in front of it. Yes.
Okay, next is the Business Enhancement Award. The Loveland Business Enhancement Award is given to a business in the city of Loveland. The recipient will have demonstrated an increase in business, increased the number of employees on the payroll, and exhibited the most effort to enhance the aesthetics of their property through a combination of renovation, building additions, painting, or beautification projects. We have two winners this year. For the first one, I would ask Vice Mayor and Sam David to please meet at the podium.
Sam, I'll present you with the plaque, but let me just tell you why you're here and why you were nominated.
Okay.
And why we moved to have you win the award along with Ramsey's Trailside. La Rosa's David is, of course, the owner of it, which for decades has been a consistent presence and anchored the southern end of the Loveland Madeira corridor. Owner Sam David has provided a family-friendly restaurant, which currently has over 40 employees. And over the years, he has provided a friendly restaurant, which employs many part and full-time, literally hundreds of Loveland citizens, many of whom are just learning the value of work because they're high school students. The Rosas recently completed a renovation of the interior and exterior, investing over $300,000 in the facility. Through its Buddy Card program, La Rosa's supports many charitable organizations, including youth sports programs. La Rosa's and Sam David have also been a major supporter of Loveland High School athletics and a major contributor to the Tigers' state-of-the-art training center and the field turf replacement project. All the while, La Rosa's has served delicious pizza, Italian dishes, and other items. La Rosa and owner Sam David would be a worthy recipient and is a worthy recipient of the Business of the Year award, and we're honored to announce that tonight.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for the award. Of course, Loveland's been very good to me, so I can't really complain about reinvesting back into our community. It's a great community. Started in the Loveland store in 1985, and yeah, it's been 85, Pat.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's been a great community. It's been a pleasure to be a part of it, and I hope to continue to do so. So thank you very much.
One of you needs to keep that. Okay, we have Ralph, Luke, and John here from Ramsey's Trailside. We couldn't decide, so yeah, that's why both are worthy recipients. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read the second winning. The Business Enhancement Award goes to one of the largest hearts in Loveland, Ramsey's Trailside. This winner deserves this award, not only because of the growth it has shown, but also the support that it gives the community. The renovations the owners made to this historic building have made Ramsey's a beautiful spot on the bike trail. The new enclosed outside space and awnings add to the charm of the restaurant, in addition to providing an increase in revenue. Ramsey's has grown exponentially since it opened a few years ago. This growth is due in part to the goodwill it has garnered by the generosity it has shown to charities and community events. From the Dragonfly Foundation to the Loveland Food Pantry, Loveland City Schools to cancer-free kids and local families, Ramsey's is the go-to destination for local support. Its friendly staff and delicious menu provide positive word-of-mouth communication, social media reviews, and posts, which generate even more revenue for Ramsey's as well as the surrounding businesses. Ramsey's isn't just a restaurant, it's an experience that keeps people coming back. The owners of Ramsey's are diehard Loveland fans and locals who wish nothing more than for the city to thrive. Ramsey's Trailside has earned its place among the elite businesses who have won the City of Loveland's Business Enhancement Award.
Thank you. For you guys that don't know, I'm John Zelke, one of the partners at Ramsey's and general manager. It's an honor to be in the same category as my man Sam there. Been in Loveland for 40 years. So I just strive to hopefully be here in 40 years and continue my commitment to this community. Just look forward to, still taking care of the people that take care of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, congratulations, gentlemen. All right, next in persons appearing before council, we have Kim Lukens.
I have 10 minutes, right?
Correct.
Okay. My name's Kim Lukens. I'm a registered voter of Loveland City, and I'm a citizen of the United States. So I have a lot of different things I want to talk about. I apologize if I seem scattered. I've talked about the diffusion of leadership before here, and the definition of democracy is government by the people, especially rule of the majority, government in which supreme powers, muscle, is in the people who are registered to vote and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving public elections. This has nothing to do with Kathy Bailey. This has to do with the position as mayor. And I hope that a group of people pull together and try to change the charter and have the mayor directly elected so that all of the registered voters can, so we can see a democracy in that type of authority, power, whatever you want to call it, influence. There are thousands of villages, towns, and cities that do this. This has nothing to do with you personally or the city of Loveland. So that is one, when I say diffusion of leadership, that is one example. Then I did a lot of research on the definition of sidewalks. There's actually a science to sidewalks. I just honestly don't understand why in front of Bishop's and Tano's and the Loveland Eatery or the Loveland Suites and the record store, why there has to be tables and chairs. There are 93 places to sit right across the street that very little people sit in. And the definition of sidewalks from a mental health state and from, I know that people want to come into places for this is solely for pedestrians or strollers or people with handicap, or, for a social thing for like two people to walk together or for dogs, to walk with dogs. And it is so chaotic in that area. I just, it's supposed to be a historic area. It's supposed to be, a place where a lot of people gather. There's like a thought about that like a feel there. And I just don't understand who owns that and who makes those decisions. It's very hard to get an answer and to get to the bottom of truth. For me, it has been. So I don't know. It's just thought. I know it drives me nuts when I try to jog by there, or when I have my dog with me, or with one of my teenagers are with me. It's crowded, And like someplace like Bishop's, they already have like 180 places to sit or something like that. So just so that's that with there is a science to the definition of sidewalks. So I just don't understand. I don't understand where everybody comes up with those decisions with how we use the sidewalks in that area, Loveland City. Then I just want to talk a little bit about why people might want to move to this area. I know that a sustainable mindset is the pedestrian walking and bicycle access for people to bike. And there are people that are very into that and very into areas that offer that. And I know that there's a lot of research on that and that there would be less carbon emission, which we all know about global warming and about how the carbon emission from vehicles affects global warming. I mean, you guys just need to research it if you don't believe me. It's just a fact. It's out there. And there are people, more and more people, hundreds of thousands of people who are hooked into this type of mindset. So that is definitely a way to draw people here, is to create more of that type of environment. Then obesity affects an alarming number of kids and children. Diabetes is another high percentage condition. Generally, we have outcome data on exercise of 150 minutes a week of cardio will result outcome data of reduced strokes, heart attacks, and longer life, generally. Data on 20 minutes outside can have as good an impact as pharmacological treatment in depression and anxiety. 40% of 18 to 45-year-olds report severe mental health concerns since the pandemic, lockdowns, and it is worse where lockdowns were more severe. Fact, research, not Kim Lucan's opinion, and I believe that is another way to lure people to this area that has such a lot of goodness if we don't continue to take all these things away. Primary physicians, many of them think getting outside, exercising, and enhancing community interaction is a great goal for healthy people in society. And that doesn't talk about drinking. I'm not opposed to that, but it's just about being able to move outside and just to move with each other socially, talk with each other, not have a cell phone with them, run, walk, that kind of thing. So these are just ideas that I believe would enhance people to move here, not just to build homes. And then I tried really hard. It took me almost 6 weeks to have a dialogue with William T. Turner II about the situation with the Brown building over there, like who makes the decisions, what type of retail businesses go in there, and I had a really hard time. He wrote me a really nice letter. I don't really have time to go through it, but all I was simply trying to do is to talk to the board there about, this is a fact, you guys. The world is moving to this. The world is moving to this. When I ran for Loveland City Council, I used the word sustainable a lot, but it's very complicated. So the world is moving towards sustainable business models. I'm not saying that the restaurants aren't wonderful. They're awesome. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I believe we need to just stop it. And I think that would help with traffic and all kinds of other things. So there are 55 different sustainable businesses that are real out there, you guys. I don't know how many people have traveled outside of this area, but they're just real. So, that's just another idea of what would lure people here. We have to adapt to the ever-changing world. The world is changing. So, I don't know. It's 142 Hounds Run if anybody wants to get information about that. And then, I have information from Merrill Lynch all about sustainable models for investments for all these empty buildings and empty office spaces. And that's all about digital marketing. And that's about Dave Kennedy and I guess the mayor, who they hire. And I I don't know. I just I believe that our city can, I don't know, needs to be a little redirected, and these models are out there. This just isn't Kim Lugan's. So anyway, I could go into more detail, but I don't know. I think that's probably enough. And when I ran for Loveland City Council, I didn't have a lot of opportunity to talk about it, so I only had 3 months to prepare. But that's all I have to say. And I'm leaving because I'm going to go take a run. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
142 Jones Drive, if anybody wants to write.
Open forum, Tom Scovanner.
I wasn't planning on talking tonight. As you may see, I'm not in my usual, as my neighbor calls, attorney costume. But I had to. I was compelled to, and I think Mr. Bateman is going to be aware of this. As I was coming home from a 4-hour drive in northern Ohio today, I come into Loveland, and I'm coming down the hill above the Whippy Dip, if you will, and it's backed up. It's 5:30, I think, and you come around the bend, and you look toward the bridge, and both lanes, bumper to bumper, all the way to the bridge. It's the traffic. It's the traffic. So we're making our way through the traffic, slowly creeping along. And as we get close to the bridge, there's a number of folks that are in the wrong lanes. And, people are shifting back and forth, trying to figure out where they're going to go because the right turn only. And lo and behold, there's a car that wants to get over. And my wife says, "Oh, why don't we let Andy in?" It was Mr. Bateman coming into the traffic. There was no need for parking at that time. Okay, there's no need for a parking bridge. These are commuters. Okay, this was the traffic, daily traffic that people on the Claremont County and the Warren County side face every day. Okay, the bridge won't help. A parking garage is not going to help this. A bridge would. And I see in the comprehensive master plan we talk about a bridge and the need for a bridge, and partnering with Warren County, Hamilton Township, Miami Township, Claremont County. We don't need to partner with them. We need to lead them. Okay, a bridge isn't a big thing to Miami Township or Hamilton Township or Warren County or Claremont County. It's a big thing to us, and we need to be out front leading our neighbors, telling them why this needs, and telling them why this is good for them, not just for Loveland. Obviously, it would be good for Loveland, but there's benefits to Miami Township, and especially, I believe, Hamilton Township and Warren County. We need to reach out to our partners in the community and be the leader in developing a new way to get over the river, to ease Loveland's traffic problem. That should be our number one focus. And like I say, I think Andy got, and I'm sure Andy's seen it before, but it's just ironic that it hit today. So I appreciate it. Please consider the traffic. That's our number one problem. Thank you.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes, Mr. Hart.
I want to thank Mr. Scovanner for his comments. I agree with what he's saying, and I also want to throw a little bone to our new assistant city manager, who has taken the lead, I believe, on making those things happen and is working on those projects as we speak. I think that we all agree, as it took me a large amount of time to come down for this meeting tonight. I think that we are all aware of that problem. I think we all agree with you, and I know that our city manager and our assistant city manager and our mayor are working very diligently on that and working to take the lead, as you said, because it is a problem that affects us more than anybody else. So,
Well, and perhaps you missed that meeting, Mr. Scovanner, but we talked about it. The three of us went and met with ODOT, and we're already working towards that. That was 2 months ago, something like that, right after you started, Mr. Wright. So we're well aware of the problem, and we have already been in touch with ODOT and are already working on what we need to do, but it will not be next month.
engineers.
Getting a bridge across the river is going to be quite a project, but you have to start somewhere, and we've already started that process. Robert Bowl, did I pronounce that correctly? I hope.
Hi, you did pronounce it correctly. My name is Robert Bowl. I live at 269 Glen Lake Road, and I actually came here to discuss one item, but a second one came to mind as I was walking across the bridge. The Loveland Avenue Bridge has sidewalks on both sides. I don't know how often you've walked across it, but if you walk on the north side of the bridge, it is atrocious.
It's not our
Quality of
fault.
the pavement. And up until tonight, or this evening, there was a piece of, it's commonly called rebar, reinforcing steel in the concrete, that was sticking up about 2 to 3 inches above the level of the sidewalk, and it had actually become a sharp point. I noticed tonight somebody took it upon themselves to bend it over the edge of the sidewalk, so it's still sticking up, but not, the sharp point is now 2 or 3 inches over the edge of the sidewalk. I do subscribe to the city's emails, and I noticed that it said one of the projects would be the sidewalk on Carl Brown Way, but I saw nothing about the sidewalk on the bridge. And, you know, as a taxpayer, if we don't warn the people that are crossing that before fixing it, we could be liable, I imagine, for lawsuits if somebody tripped, fell, hurt themselves. I'm not a lawyer, but some of you may be, but I've heard these rumors that things like this happen, and I would think you would at least want to block off that side of the bridge to pedestrians and make a crosswalk at both ends, or at least mark off those areas where the rebar is exposed and people could easily trip over it. Because otherwise, it's going to come out of my pocket as a taxpayer if we lose a lawsuit for not having adequate safe, passage across our bridges. And actually, Mr. Wright has been very responsive to me, and Mr. Kennedy also. I ask you guys to try and reach out to Mr. Wisby. I'll call tomorrow and leave a message, although I don't get through as quickly as I imagine the two of you do. And maybe something immediately could be done to make that a safe passage, and then put it on the list of priorities. Because the south side, I don't know why it is. The cement is fantastic over there, but on the north side, it's terrible. But the main reason I came here tonight is item number 17 in the agenda. I did actually read through the agenda. It's an interesting experience. I hadn't done that much lately. This has to do with the Planning and Zoning Commission appointment. And I read that Kathy Bailey, Mayor Bailey, is nominating Rob Weisgerber to replace Mr. Cady, who's resigning from it. And I just wonder, is this really the best we could do? If Mr. Weisgerber wasn't able to regularly attend council meetings in person in the past and didn't run for re-election, is he really the most suitable person to be on the Planning and Zoning Commission in the future? Just a question.
Thank you, Mr. Bowl. I will say with regard to the bridge, it is a high priority. It's not our bridge, so there's only so much we can do. We will certainly look into making it safer in the interim, but it is Hamilton County's bridge, and I think we talk to them weekly to say, let's move this project along. It's Hamilton County's bridge. It's not our bridge. So we can't do anything to move this project along other than keep making phone calls to move it along. I think they're waiting on Cincinnati Bell, correct?
Yes, the city worked with the Hamilton County Engineers Office to secure funding for the project. The reason why the veterinarian or the north side of the bridge is worse than the other is because it's full of conduit. So it can't be repaired. It has to be replaced. So the plan is that all the conduit will be snipped off at on the west and east side, and conduit ran underneath the bridge, which will allow all of the sidewalks to be replaced. The city worked with Hamilton County to get a grant for the project where the city's local match would be replacing all the railing with period style railing. Project came in $300,000 over. We're now reaching out, the mayor is now working with the Claremont counties to help us with that, because that bridge is actually joint owned by both Hamilton County and Claremont.
That does not stop me from making, like you said, I will get with Mr. Wisby first thing in the morning to make some moderate repairs. I'm trying not to have the north side of the bridge blocked off because I feel that while the crossing over on Carl Brown may be safe and doable, there is no marked area on the other side, so we're trying to get this moving along. But it's a combination of multiple items. But I will be talking to Mr. Wisby first thing in the morning. I'm trying to hold off from the engineers from blocking off the sidewalk. But that's really where we're at. It's full of conduit. That's why you can't just chisel away at it. It's a myriad of wires. So the only way to repair it is snip, snip, and then all new conduit. So.
Yes.
I'd like to speak to Mr. Weisgerber's appointment to the Planning and Zoning. It's been my experience throughout my business career that one of the most important attributes any corporation or any organization of any kind has is the institutional memory that some people have in every organization. And it's been my experience that every time there are personnel cuts and reorganizations, one of the first things to go is the institutional memory of an organization. And without that institutional memory, no organization survives very long, and no organization can run nearly as efficiently because they just can't. They don't have the institutional memory. And I've known Rob Weisgerber since I got involved with City Council in 2017. I developed a good relationship with him. I think that he and I will cheerfully agree that we disagree on almost everything. But nonetheless, Rob Weisgerber has been passionately involved in this city since at least the last 40 years. He knows as much about the way city government runs in Loveland as anybody alive, certainly anybody in this room today. And while I disagree with him on many things, I regard him as a friend, and I think having Rob and Rob's presence at City Council meetings via Zoom was certainly better than not having him here. I think the mayor's appointment of Rob to the Planning and Zoning Commission is a good one. He brings knowledge that nobody else has to the planning and zoning process, as well as the history of this city. And I'm delighted that the mayor selected him. Thank you.
And I will say, because Mr. Weisgerber mentioned it when he was still on council, he had an extremely serious health condition at the time that kept him from being here. I'm more than happy to report that he has made his way through that and is healthy now, so that should not be a problem. We could now review and approval of minutes from the April 25th, 2022 council meeting. Are there any additions or changes to those minutes? Can we have the motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
The second reading of an ordinance. Please read the ordinance.
Ordinance establishing the compensation and classification for the part-time position of police records clerk, modifying the title of building and zoning clerk, and repealing ordinance 2022-2.
Any questions or comments on the ordinance? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping? Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Ordinance 39 is adopted by a vote of 6-0.
Mr. Wright?
Thank you, Mayor. This evening we have a resolution for council regarding the Loveland City School District revenue sharing that's associated with the administration of some of our CRA abatements in the downtown district here. 570982 of the revised code requires municipal corporations to share their income tax revenue that it collects for active CRA areas with the local school district, that school district being Loveland City Schools. Specifically, 570982C2 requires the revenue sharing where payroll collection exceeds or payroll amounts that exceed $1 million for any tax year in which the property is exempted. So each year we do this as part of the administration of these CRAs. We look at these, and this year we actually had we had 4 businesses or exempted properties that exceeded the $1 million annual payroll threshold in the downtown area. And absent a specific agreement, the statute requires a 50-50 revenue split. So the resolution this evening will handle this and will take care of this for this year. The amount that would be distributed would be $73,495.89. And that would be the fiscal impact. The option would be to approve, not approve, or seek to modify the school district agreement. So,
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Any questions or comments for Mr. Wright? Vice Mayor?
Mr. Wright, I assume the school district is aware of this is the amount that
we'll transmit this to them via email prior to finalizing the payment, so that they are aware and they can catalog, obviously for records keeping purposes.
And I think we've enjoyed several years in a row where the amount has never been in controversy. And I assume that will be the case this year.
Hope so.
Yes, Mr. Blair?
Just out of curiosity, Mr. Wright, do you know approximately what the amount was last year?
58.
Off the top of my head, it was significantly less. It was around 50,000.
58,000. Thank you.
58942.
Not bad. Any other questions? Read the resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the issuance of revenue sharing distribution payment to the Loveland City School District relative to various community reinvestment area exempt properties as required pursuant to Section 5709.82 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Any comments, questions on the resolution? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Hart,
I'll be abstaining.
Vice Mayor Phelps,
Yes.
Mr. Ping,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
Ordinance Resolution 40 is adopted by a vote of 6-0.
Mr. Wright?
Thank you, Mayor. Next item I have for council this evening. This is a resolution authorizing the execution of the Chestnut Street Brownfield Remediation Grant Program. So, as we're all aware, the city was successful in receiving a grant award for the Chestnut Street Brownfield Remediation through the Ohio Brownfield Program. That grant totaled approximately $3,323,493. Really kind of a banner moment for the city. The city's owned the property since '79. The property, long-standing issues as an environmental contaminated site, long-standing city dump. Here's our opportunity to resolve that. So with the successful grant application, and I won't belabor all of the details about the issues that we found there throughout the various environmental studies, the resolution this evening would authorize the city manager to execute the grant agreement, officially put us under contract with the Department of Development to administer the grant. We have a short time window. The funds have to be spent before, I believe it's June of 2023, not really July 1, so June 30th effectively. And this would allow us to proceed. So this is really step 1 of 2. There's a following item after this evening to engage the consultant in that regard. When council authorized the pursuit of the grant late last year and into this year, the worst case scenario, based upon kind of unknowns, we don't know what's there, was about 1.1 million in local match with, it's a 3-to-1 basically with the matching funds. So that would be the absolute worst case scenario, but this would be the first step required to proceed.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for Mr. Wright? Yes, Mr. Hart.
Mr. Wright, this with 25% match, do we get the 3.3 regardless of how much we put in? Is it because we figured for worst case scenario, or does the amount we get it's prorated?
It's prorated, so it's always 3-to-1. And with any grant that I've worked with, so if the remediation costs were to come in at And again, back of the napkin math, if it came in at $2.5 million, we would get a 3-to-1 split on that.
Gotcha.
So,
Any other questions? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Indeed, I'm commend the city for applying for and getting the grant. Question I have is with regard to the July 1st deadline for the spending to be accomplished. This project, I think, will probably be fairly big and might run past that. Is this set in stone, or do you anticipate there'll be extensions? How's that going to work?
So, in talking to the consultant that's kind of helped us through the process here to date, the majority of the work can be accomplished. The most of the heavy lifting is the fill, the excavation, remediation, getting rid of the contaminated soil, getting rid of the garbage, and kind of peeling that back. And then the groundwater remediation, they inject, I'll mess this up, it's emulsified something valiant iron that basically neutralizes the groundwater contamination. And in that those processes can happen relatively quickly. And if note, there was a project schedule provided. The bulk of the time is really the monitoring, and there's quarterly monitoring. There's 6 quarterly monitoring reports that occur that the consultant has proposed, and so those will continue to occur, and we'll get reports after each quarterly monitoring. But the bulk of the work and the monies would be spent. The goal is to spend them prior to the grant deadline. So
advance payments might be in order.
Yeah, I mean, you could have advance payments. You're going to have the bulk of the construction and excavation probably done. Final, maybe some restoration, grading, seeding, things like that. And I would imagine there'll be some significant, cut, fill, site balancing that occurs as part of this. Again, when we start peeling back layers of the onion, we won't know what we don't know. But really, the intent here is to get this site ready to market for future development for the city.
Which, I may add, my conversations with Ohio Department of Development was that they would largely like to see the city draw out as much of the grant money. Because if you recall, when we applied, it was such a short window that we said, okay, the wetland is 95% of the property. The water table is so polluted. Everything was to the nth degree. It could be a fraction of that. Of those amounts. Remember, with wetlands, you have to replace it, and there's in another location. So the short time window had 2 effects on the city. A, it made us have to do the worst case scenario, but B, it probably also is one of the reasons the city was successfully funded, because it was such a short turnaround, and us hitching our wagon with Patriot, which the city did, helped us do all of this and get it done. I would anticipate, with all frankness, that the city will also probably be approached along the way for a commercial or a light industrial development on it. These grants can be transferred onward, so a lot has to play out with this. But like Corey said, this is the first step. And if my conversation with the Ohio Department of Development is, once we know what it's going to cost, they would like to draw down as much of the grant money as possible. So, and that's what we would likely do. So,
Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Bateman.
I'm glad, Mr. Wright, that you brought up the schedule, because I just had a couple of questions, I guess, around that, and maybe this might be more appropriate for the next step with the consultant. But just having had your conversations around this. So, if the objective is obviously to acquire this no further action certification, and that takes place through the bulk of time with this 78 to 82 weeks of groundwater monitoring. Was that worst case scenario? Is there a reality where that monitoring takes longer and it's just not coming up as being clean, and they'd have to go in and put more of this iron in there or something like that? Or is that not how it works? I'm just curious if it seems like a long amount of time. I'm assuming that's through statistics that they're saying, given this amount of time, that's how long it takes for the groundwater to clean up. But is there a reality somewhere where it just doesn't take, and you have to go back to a previous step to try to remediate it?
So, and I'll jump ahead to kind of give us that perspective. So in the scope of work that Patriot has proposed to administer all phases of this, which council will consider next. They talk about the EZVI liquid amendment that they inject into the soil, and again, I'm not a chemist, so but anyway, I guess they put the good stuff in the soil, and it makes the bad stuff go away. So, but then we check the groundwater monitoring in that regard. It's a pretty significant amount, about an acre and a half of area in the contamination zone. They inject it down to about 15 feet, it looks like, vertically, 10 feet radius, 171 injection points, about 85,000 gallons, 85,000 gallons. So that's what they project there in that regard. And then the whole point of the quarterly monitoring, what they'll do is they have to install some wells, and then they also will use 9 existing monitoring wells that they have. They'll have 11 wells on the site. They'll check these things quarterly. They'll have a report. They look at that. They will provide the report. And if, we would assume that as part of that, they would provide us with that recommendation that we would see, hey, the contamination is being mitigated, or no, it's not. We have to go back. And I would imagine those are things that can happen concurrently kind of throughout the monitoring process. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Read the resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the city manager to execute and enter into a grant agreement with the Ohio Department of Development for the Ohio Brownfield Remediation Program, Chestnut Street Remediation Project, identified as grant number ODSA 2022-190240.
Any questions or comments on the resolution? Call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Resolution 41 is adopted by a vote of 6-0.
Mr. Wright?
Thank you. And the last step of this will be to authorize the city manager to execute a proposal for remedial oversight and the voluntary action program, certified professional services relative to the Ohio Brownfield grant program. And so this resolution would essentially authorize the city manager to engage in a time and materials engagement with Patriot Engineering to administer all phases of the program based upon the described action approach. As I indicated, there's really 5 steps to this. Some of these are going to run concurrently. You're going to have, the lead. You have to do the wetlands delineation, which is a pretty significant thing and something that will happen very quickly. You'll have the lead and garbage removal. You will have the groundwater remediation effort, to kind of the drilling into the soil, and then injections. And then the monitoring is really the longest part. As part of that, also, the goal is to achieve this voluntary action program NFA documentation, which will essentially clear the site. And you basically get there's covenants not to sue and all those things with that. And basically the site is ready to go. And so this agreement, Patriot Engineering, they did the really kind of a pretty heavy lift in a short period of time, reviewing kind of the litany of studies that we've had on the site throughout the many, many decades that we've owned it, kind of compiling that, really preparing the documented worst case scenario, and then coming up with an action plan that they believe will address that. They have considerable experience in this, and the program approach, well, I'm not a chemist, I'm not an environmental scientist, it seems pretty thorough, and we'll keep plugging away at it until we get our NFA. So,
any other questions or comments? Yes.
The Patriot contract, you said it's time and material, so it's not to exceed the amount of 4 point whatever million. It could come in less than that.
Yes, it would. So that the total grant, the 4.4 million, includes the actual remediation, the monitoring, the engineering and consultant fees, everything. So again, as I indicated earlier, you start peeling back layers of the onion. There may be more in one area. The wetlands delineation may come back less. It's kind of a fluid process.
Anyone else? Read the resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a professional service agreement with Patriot Engineering and Environmental Inc. for remediation, oversight, and Certified Ohio Voluntary Action Program services related to the Chestnut Street remediation project funded through the Ohio Brownfield Remediation Grant Program.
Any questions, comments on the resolution? Call the roll, please.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Resolution 42 is adopted by a vote of 6-0.
Mr. Kennedy?
Before you is a memo and a resolution which would state services to be provided by the city for the annexation of the Claremont County Park property, 101.063 acres of land. This is sort of standard procedure that the city does every time we have an annexation request. Everything is done and timed with when it is submitted to the county commissioner, sort of like what Corey just did. This has a two-step process that follows in a separate. I changed our standard language a little bit because this, as we stated in the March 22nd, where we designated our agent for this property, I went into a little bit of detail. That's why I copied that memo as reference that this is perpetual park space. That it is in the deeds, and which is obviously a good thing for the city. It's a good thing for the residents of that area. Real quick math, the city currently has 127 acres of park space. This annexation alone will almost double the city's entire park space. This is, I'm actually going to be on the committee, or me and future representatives city will have as they plan this park space. It's a very passive recreational area, and it's a real excitement for the city to have this within the city. So I made a few modifications rather than just throwing the standard language in front of you. It not being residential, will never have inhabitants and so on and so forth. I sort of peeled back certain elements, but I kept some because maybe they would want to do a lighting district with the city at the entryway or any of the roadways. So I try to keep it as option as can be. But outside of that, this is step 2. Of 4 steps. You did the one, you designated an agent. Well, I executed an agreement. Then we designated an agent on March 22nd. We do the services to be provided tonight. We also dictate what the zoning on the property will be. That's the next step, council step 3. And then step 4 is if the commissioners approve it, which I anticipate they will, that will come back to you and you'll formally accept the annexation of the property into the city limits.
Do you want to talk about the type 2 annexation now, or do you want to wait till after?
So just to follow up on that, so there's 2 steps to this. The other step of this is that annexation laws have really changed in my 37 years of government work. And I'm not taking sides one way or another from a township or city standpoint, but it has changed exponentially. So at this point, we're doing this park annexation as a type 2. It really made no difference whether it was a type 1 or type 2 because it will be exempt property. Neither Miami Township or the city of Loveland will ever receive a penny of tax dollars from this property. The city will receive a small water bill for the one of the few structures that'll be on the building, which is a restroom facility, which even in itself will have a green roof, will be all solar paneled and so on and so forth. So with that, the laws have changed, I would say probably to favor the townships a little bit more, but over the time they've changed. And part of that is if we would say annex a piece of property in a heavy residential area, bring it in as residential low density, and then within a couple planning commission meetings later, change it to light industrial. This would require that everything that buffers the adjacent township properties has to have a buffer. This is the ultimate in just housekeeping item to show that we're doing this. It will be a park. It will be park forever. It is compatible with all adjacent residential uses. So this is not a factor, but it is a requirement for us to have all of our ducks in a row when this goes to the commissioners relatively soon. So it's a 2-step process. There's 2 separate resolutions. Mr. Braun's real adamant we can only have 1 item per legislation. So we're making a minor modification to the Plat. The Plat, our annexation will go out into State Route 48. That's our standard practice. It will not do that on Urbana Road. Because that is an older area. Some of those property owners actually own onto the roadway, so we cannot annex those properties. So we've been working on this for quite a while. So this is step 2. So step 1 is services that will be provided. That's a resolution. Step 2 would be you going ahead and establishing as residential low density.
All right. Does anybody have any questions or comments on either one of Mr. Kennedy's memos? What do you have to say? All right, we'll go ahead and read the first resolution.
Resolution setting forth services that will be provided by the City of Loveland to the owners of real property located in Miami Township, Claremont County, if such area is annexed to the City of Loveland, and stating the approximate date by which such services will be available if annexed.
Any comment on the legislation? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Resolution 43 is adopted by a vote of 6 to 0.
Read the next resolution, please.
Resolution regarding the zoning of approximately 101 acres of real property currently owned by the Claremont County Park District, for which a petition to annex into the City of Loveland has been filed.
Any comment on the resolution? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey? Resolution 44 is adopted by a vote of 6 to 0.
Mr. Kennedy?
Back in 2017, following the fires, the 200 block of West Loveland, the city established in an effort to try to transition away from paver sidewalks. We've transitioned away towards a new design. We approached Ramsey's, Tano's, and Bishop's Quarter to help us with a 50-50 co-share to redo all the sidewalks in front of those buildings. That soldiering design, which is going to follow through with the current streetscape plan, is a much more desirable design, which we will continue hopefully for many years until all of it's replaced. With that in mind, I was in contact with the owners of Tahona, which is also Tahona Roadie and Landing Center, about a section of 120-foot section in front of Tahona that we desired to have sidewalks installed. It's actually one of Mayor Barley's projects, is that we were trying to encourage pedestrian flow, better pedestrian flow from the Linda Cox parking area into the Carl Brown district. And working with Robin and Mark Bersani, we were able to put together a path, some guardrails, which recently got taken out, and we're working on getting those replaced. And we created a pretty nice path. And with that, we're seeing a lot more pedestrian traffic in that area. It's very unstable. We really do need these sidewalks. I received, remember, I always say sidewalks. This is sidewalks and curbs. I always need to emphasize that. That's important. Curbing and the stormwater and all that is part of the project. So I reached out, and typically, as we do, we always get better cost bids when we reach out to our current road contractor who is in town. So I reached out to J.K. Muir, received a quote for the sidewalks, 120 feet, 6 feet wide, full ADA accessibility. And we were at $23,200. I approached the owners of the property about doing a 50% co-share, and they agreed. City Solicitor Mr. Braun and I have put together a proposal contract, which will be signed prior to commencing the project. As is the case for these situations, the city will pay this in full, and then will be replaced. Then will be reimbursed by the property owner. It worked flawlessly when we did this after the fires. This isn't the only thing we're trying to do. We're also working with the Firefighters Association to do a kosher match with them on the fire sidewalks around the Brown building. And we are also looking at whether or not that area could call for a mid-block crossing as you come down through that stretch. So people may not remember, but we've been working on this for a while. We actually widened Carl Brown removed those Bradford pears, which were causing issues, and we were able to make that whole turn, that whole radius turn, corrected that. So these are all part of the incremental changes that we've been making on Carl Brown to prepare for this. So the resolution would be simply for the contract with me and J.K. Muir. I do not need legislation for me to authorize an agreement for the co-share with Wilderness Capital.
All right. Any questions, comment? Read the resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with J.K. Muir for South Carl Brown Way sidewalk installation.
Comment on the resolution? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Resolution 45 is adopted by a vote of 6-0.
Mr. Kennedy?
So if you recall, just recently at the last council meeting, City Council adopted legislation accepting a body-worn camera grant funding and executing a contract with Axon Products for the city's first set of body cameras. You actually took legislation earlier this evening associated with that when you established the position of police records clerk, which we will then begin to fill, which will be partially funded for year one through the body-worn camera grant funding that Chief Ray was able to get us before he retired. If you recall during that conversation, Safety Director Sue Mattson had mentioned the importance for us to move forward with MVRs, mobile video recorders. Those and the importance to move forward with that funding. Well, one of the very popular programs is again from years of doing this in a community that we had to fund everything with grants. NatureWorks is sort of your go-to for park grants. The JAGs, the Justice Assistant Grants, through the Office of Criminal Justice Services is one of your go-tos for police equipment. Bulletproof vests are all covered through the BVP program. So the city's done really well through this, and actually years ago got mobile video recorders funded through this program. The Edward Byrne, there's two JAG grants. The Edward Byrne is now due June 2nd. There's another regular JAG, as we call it, which will be due in the fall. We typically apply every time. So what we want to apply for, and talking to Sue Mattson about this, is that it is really important that we pair these body cameras with our MVRs. So Sue did some research and reached out to Axon, and they recommended the Fleet 3. Just one more thing, one key element that Sue pointed out to me was the data, the sheer amount of data that having a separate MVR than we would an Axon and a separate body camera would be. It's just two massive buckets of data as opposed to one bucket of data. And I also really liked her comment, and I quoted her, but she mentioned, and I'm just going to read it to embarrass her a little bit, but it really makes sense. She said that the pairing would represent a time savings for a smaller agency such as ours to work with one product, to train on one project, and to solidify knowledge for repetition in one product. And I know Amy would vouch for that. Repetition is what they do. They repetition, having that. So we're not just taking the Axon Fleet 3 because it pairs with it. It's also the state of the art. Ever read a little bit more reading and background on these? They have as good as the camera is for the exterior. It's as good as the interior, full view, head to toe of the back seat and all of that, and any kind of shenanigans that go on. And it takes us back to why our body cameras, not just the Axon, important for the city. Police officer safety, that should be number one, and it's listed number one. Transparency is up there. Conviction rates and police officers training. They'll tell you, both of them will tell you that they go through these cameras all the time and learn and train, and that's important. So I'm excited to go after this funding. I love this kind of part of the job. I'd like to go after 12. We have 12 units right now, but that's not real realistic. It always behooves anyone applying for grants to see what they funded last year. What was the average? The average last year was around 47,800. We could apply for 12. We're not going to get 12. So I'm recommending that we apply for 6 at 12,000 per. That's sort of the high end unit. Sue recommended that we don't skimp on this. That with that is it comes more ease of transition of data at the end of the day. So that is a total 6 times 12 is 72,000. That would be a grant request of 54,000 and a city share of 18,000. That fits in. And the nice thing about these JAGs is we'll find out in the fall, right? We're in the midst of the budget. Then we would be able to do this first thing in the beginning of 2023 and be pretty much in line to go. So the legislation is authorizing me to submit it and committing a local match of 18 grand if we're funded.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Hart?
So you wanted 12 like total is like would be ideal, is what you're saying? Is this something we would go after like in the future, like come back?
I was going to go after the regular JAG in the fall for the other 6.
Anyone else? Read the resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the submission of a 2022 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant.
Any comment on the resolution? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey? Mr. Bateman? Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Resolution 46 is adopted by a vote of 6-0.
Mr. Wright?
Thank you, Mayor. We have an ordinance this evening proposing an ordinance which would allow for the execution of a contract amendment relative to the city's ongoing acquisition effort for the 106 West Loveland mobile station. The ordinance, which, if approved, would authorize this amendment. This would redefine certain obligations of both the city, acting in our capacity as the buyer, and the seller, Gallowall Inc. I've been working very closely with Mr. Braun as we work through sort of multiple facets of the acquisition and site remediation. It's really 2 different concurrent processes. But one thing this amendment does is it really clears up an issue with taking possession of the property while an active gas station use is still operating on the premises. So what this amendment does, it resolves issues associated with any holdover period by the seller, which would essentially, the amendment ties the city's possession and recordation of the deed and the transfer to the termination of gas station operations. That's a critical component because of, with Buster, you get into Buster, which is the Bureau of Underground Storage Tanks, you get into the grant programs, you get into the abandoned gas station program and the chain of title and all these things. You really do not want to have, you want that clean break there with the gas station use. When they're gone, they're terminated. That's it. Then we own basically an abandoned, mothballed, terminated site. Now there'll be other obligations in the future. And as I noted in the memorandum, we are working with the land bank because there's some important designations that we have to achieve to get fully eligible for the abandoned gas station grant program, and that's particularly important with regard to known releases on the site. As I indicated, there's a few active tanks, but several tanks that are abandoned in place. They had prior releases. Those releases were not fully mitigated, and so we want to be able to preserve every avenue for the city to go after grant funds to be able to obtain that. And there's this magical Class C status that you have to achieve, and I think I've mentioned that 40 or 50 times in the last 3 weeks talking with Mr. Braun. But this Class C status means that Buster knows or thinks that there's no longer any financially viable party. And that's why this is important, that we would do this amendment. We break the gas station operation at the time that it transfers. It allows, the closing to occur, and the seller is obligated to park a deed in escrow and sign subsequent amendments if he terminates his operations earlier than his July 1 date. So that's really the first part of this process.
All right, and you're asking this be passed as an emergency. Can you explain the reason?
And I'm asking for it to be passed as an emergency for a couple reasons. Number one, because of the time associated with closing. We want to be able to get this wrapped up with the seller. And obviously we have some pending obligations that are required. I believe the seller is producing or is in the process of producing documents to title currently, and they're vetting those documents to make sure they have authority to sign and all those things. So we do have an upcoming obligation to fund and to close, and so this will mitigate that. The other component of that is tying this in with the working with the now forming Claremont County Land Bank or Land Reutilization Corporation, and working through that. We want to have the contract amendment in place so that this part is buttoned up and we have the deed in escrow so that they're comfortable, so that if we were to assign that through that, which would be a subsequent action by council, we could then assign it and they're comfortable that they're not going to get possession of a gas station, or even if we decided to go alone, we would not get possession of a gas station that's still actively running a fuel center operation, which there's a whole host of liabilities associated with that with regard to future releases. You have an accident. This is just cleaner this way. So that's why the emergency ordinance is requested.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Blair.
I just want to make sure that none of the action we take tonight with this mitigates in any way, shape, or form our commitment to clean that up.
Absolutely not. In fact, it's in furtherance of that because it actually preserves the city's ability to go after grant money to do that. And that's something that we've really been working. There's a pretty complex questionnaire with this abandoned gas station program where you have to answer a series of questions before you can even start at go. And then one of those is achieve this Class C status. So that's something we've been working very closely with some consultants and Mr. Braun's office, solicitor's office, to try and identify what those steps are, and then also working concurrently with the port through, we'll have access to the Ohio Demolition Fund program. We actually submitted the site for consideration as part of the demolition program. We're going to try and have all the existing tanks remediated. So the active tanks have to be discontinued within 30 days, have to be drained, decommissioned, basically abandoned in place. That will happen. The county will advance the demolition grant. If we're successful, we'll get the funding for that. Then we get to rip all the old tanks and the new tanks out of the ground. The 3 abandoned in place tanks now are apparently filled with concrete. So that's going to be a pretty significant effort. I guess they have to cut those apart and jackhammer them out and everything. And then they'll backfill the site with clean fill. But so all of this is in preparation of that. And then once we certify that we don't have any new unknown releases with the active tanks, and we certify that this is the extent of the mitigation that's required to get the no further action letter for the existing abandoned in place properties, that you basically can then proceed with mitigation.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Just a curious question. Does he take the pumps too and signage, or are those our responsibility?
I'm not sure. So I think that we'll just get the improvements as it stands. My guess is that he'll drain nearly every last drop of purchased fuel out of those tanks and sell it. But, part of the decommissioning process will be, they'll take the rest of that out of there. We have to notify Buster. We have to go through a pretty complicated process to decommission those tanks. There's some timelines, and we would actually work with a consultant to make sure that we achieve those. So,
The only thing I want to add, just because I think it's important for the people on 48, is our intent is to be able to do the turn lane as part of our 2023 road program. So that the designs on that with TEC, which is a very basic design, but it's the design for the turn lane and the reconfiguring of the traffic signals will all be part of next year's road program. So we're hoping that even if we're still messing with some of the tanks closer to the railroad side of the property, that we'll still be able to proceed with that turn lane, because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. So we really do intend that to be in our 2023 road program.
Mr. Braun.
The only other thing I want to add, question, is we did encourage them to take as much as they can from the property before we take possession of it. As Mr. Kennedy said to us, that's the less we have to demo.
Yeah.
Any comments or questions? Read the ordinance, please.
Ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement to the purchase agreement. Sorry. Can I start over? Yes. Ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to the purchase agreement for real property located at 106 West Loveland Avenue and declaring an emergency.
Any comment on the legislation? Call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Ordinance 47 is adopted by a vote of 6-0.
Mr. Kennedy.
So it was, I guess, somewhat appropriate that that Jan was here tonight because the city has received the city's historic preservation district received applications for the designation of two cemeteries as local historic sites. The Ramsey Paxton Cemetery, which some of us were up there Saturday for the dedication of that, and the Hill Wagner Cemetery, which is off of State Route 48. So as this is the process, part of is always have to remember that the historic preservation design guidelines deals with within the boundaries of the historic preservation district. Forgetting the design guidelines for system for a minute and going back to what was the beginning of the whole process, which is the city's historic preservation regulations, which working with the Ohio Liquor Board today, which is part of the reason we're able to have the community entertainment district. These are all interconnected, was that the city would up and beyond designating and reviewing construction within the boundaries is the greater good of them promoting historic preservation within the city as a whole. So part of that is that, as everyone knows, there's such a thing called National Historic Preservation District. There's recognition, and then there's obviously state recognition for structures and sites. The city has in place a local historic designation, which to this day we only have one structure, which is the White Pillars Homestead. So applications were submitted for the two cemeteries. The city city councils received a recommendation of approval from the Historic Preservation and Planning Commission that both be designated as historic sites. It can be sites and it can be construction. It can be structures. So at this point in time, all the city council is asked to do is to set a public hearing for June 14th, 2022, for you to do your own review. At that point in time, there will be legislation in front of you formally designating them as historic sites under the anticipation that you will likely approve that. City council does not have to do a public hearing, but to me, there may be a day that you may differ with the Historic Preservation Planning Commission's recommendation. With the White Pillars Homestead, you held a public hearing. It just seems to me it would be appropriate to go ahead and that you're setting that trend. So that's all you would do at this point in time, is set the public hearing for June 14th.
Any comments or questions? Can we have a motion to set a public hearing?
I'll move to schedule a public hearing for the historic designation of the Ramsey, Paxton, and Hill Wagner cemeteries on June 14th, 2022 at or about 7 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Ping,
Yes.
Mayor Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Next item is on page 133 of your packet. Mr. Wright?
Thank you, Mayor. So this action is being transmitted to the City Council. This is a requirement of the of Section 1151.02 of our Special Planning District regulations. So, in reference to case number 22-02, Harvest Special Planning District application 932 Abandonville Road, this notice serves as notice of final action by the Loveland City of Loveland Planning and Zoning Commission regarding an application filed by Dries Holmes for the above referenced SPD application. So specifically, Section 1151.02A2 required the planning. There was an application filed pursuant to that section on March 17th. The public hearing was held by the Planning and Zoning Commission, which was continued in place at that time and then resumed at the May 4th, 2022 meeting. The Planning Commission resumed that action, and at the conclusion of the hearing, took action to adopt a motion to not recommend the initiation of the SPD as required by Chapter 1151, Section 1151.02A2C of the Planning and Zoning Code. That recommendation was adopted by a vote of 3-1, with Mr. Revin, Mr. Bateman, and Mr. O'Neill voting to adopt the resolution or adopt the motion, and Mr. Kressler voting against its adoption. So this action is being forwarded to City Council per the requirements of the Planning and Zoning Code within the required 30 days after the action taken by the Planning and Zoning Commission pursuant to 1151.02, 1151.02A2D of the Planning and Zoning Code.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. As our council rep on planning and zoning, Mr. Raymond, do you have any follow-up to what occurred at that meeting?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think Mr. Wright did a good job sort of describing the dates and the details around it. It was originally started back in, I think, February with the recommendation to hold a public hearing, which was then on the 17th, and that was continued, as Mr. Wright said, until May 4th. I think that the application, in many ways, it did fulfill the purpose and scope of a special planning district, but not in every way. And I think that was really the key debate that was had within the commission, but also with a lot of the attendees from the public, on both dates, on the March 17th and on the May 4th date. We heard a lot from residents about the potential impact that the proposal may have on the city. And I think when the commission was deliberating, we were looking more along the spirit of the purpose and scope of a special planning district. And just speaking from my seat, I think it was certainly creative on the part of the applicant, but I don't know that it really fulfilled the sensitive site planning that was necessary. I think that the jump from the existing zoning from residential low density to the special planning district, which indicated a 92% increase in the density of each lot, which was pretty drastic, really fell short in a lot of ways in terms of the spirit of the comprehensive master plan, which talks about going to similar zoning. And so I think being zoned as low density and making that jump to as many large houses on smaller lots seemed a little bit like it had a lot of, like I said, it fell short. I'd also think I'd take this time just to commend the property owner on as we today sit with another annexation step in the annexation process to land that formerly belonged to the Grail. I think they have done a good job of looking to preserve the green space, which was a common theme throughout those public hearings. So I think, again, I'll just say that this special planning district was close but no cigar when it came to fulfilling what I saw as the requirements, and it looks like my colleagues, as the result of their motion not to recommend, felt the same way.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions regarding that? All right, there are various committee minutes and reports. Any issues, comments with those? The last item is on the last page of your agenda, 164, and this is an appointment to Planning and Zoning Commission. Michael Cady is a fairly long-standing member of Planning and Zoning, so I felt it was important to try to replace him with someone that has a sort of a breadth and wealth of knowledge with regard to planning and zoning in the city, and I couldn't think of anybody better than Rob Weisgerber to do that. He certainly will come in there ready to hit the ground running. In response to the gentleman's concerns, it's my understanding Mr. Weisgerber is not a voting member of Finance Commission, but is a advisor to that, and I believe he's been at every meeting this year, correct? In person. So that's really not a problem any longer for Mr. Weisgerber, thank goodness for him and us. So my recommendation is that we appoint Robert Weisgerber to the Planning and Zoning Commission to serve the remainder of Mr. Cady's term, which would end on December 31st, 2024. That requires a motion to do that.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I'll just say I'm looking forward to working with Mr. Weisgerber again. I agree with Mr. Blair, what he said earlier tonight about the wealth of experience that he has, and I think he'll bring a lot of that historical perspective, as well as a sort of fierce advocate for property owners and the general spirit of and purpose of zoning to that. So I'm looking forward to serving with him.
Thank you. Anyone else? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right. Under Council reports. Would like to congratulate Grace McCarran, who was the female winner of the 2022 Flying Pig Full Marathon and is a Loveland resident. So congratulations to Grace McCarran. Salute to Leaders is put on annually by the Claremont County Chamber of Commerce, and several of us, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Wright, myself, the Vice Mayor, Mr. Bateman, Mr. Blair, and Mr. Ping were all present, as was Sue Matson, who was there certainly to support our nominee, but also her mother, who won an award that night. So the City of Loveland's nominee was Peggy Goodwin. Anybody that knows Peggy Goodwin knows exactly why she would have received that award. And we did our best to sort of summarize everything she brings to the City of Loveland that night, but you can't possibly do that. But so congratulations to Peggy Goodwin. Now, Mr. Wright's mother there is the MC, right? She's running the whole show.
She's the winner.
That's right. All right, so on Saturday, we also had the dog park grand opening. Vice Mayor, Mr. Ping, Mr. Hart, myself, and gosh, almost all of our staff, I think. A lot of them were there that day. So if anybody that doesn't know, our dog park is called the Matt Haverkamp Foundation Dog Park. And it has the big sign, but we're also working on adding a bronze sign that explains what the Matt Haverkamp Foundation is. And if I could, just because I think it's so unique that we're naming it that, I'd like to just read what is at least close to what will be on that sign. The Matt Haverkamp Foundation was established in November 2005 in remembrance of Gulf Manor Police Canine Handler Matt Haverkamp. The mission of the foundation is to continue Matt's legacy and keep his memory alive by supporting law enforcement agencies throughout Greater Cincinnati. Through donations and fundraising events, the foundation purchases canine officers and provides the protective equipment they need to safely serve their communities. The City of Loveland's canine program was built from scratch by Officer Jose Alejandro and his canine partner Argo. In 2007, the city began working with the Matt Haverkamp Foundation to secure the city's second canine, Azar, and because of the generosity and support of that Matt Haverkamp Foundation, the City of Loveland has been able to continue its canine program for decades. This park is dedicated to all canines and their handlers who serve the Loveland community and the Greater Cincinnati area, thanks to the Matt Haverkamp Foundation. So. Matt's mother, Nancy Haverkamp, was present when we unveiled the name and was quite surprised and quite touched by that honor. Also on Saturday was the dedication ceremony for the historic Ramsey Paxton Cemetery. Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Wright and Mr. Hart and myself were present for that. When I listened to how that cemetery was overgrown, and when you read in your packet about what it looks like now, it was really a pretty neat event to see that and to see the dedication. Mr. Kennedy, unfortunately, had to step away because he was in charge of the Valentine ladies that day. But he was. This is a key to the cemetery that is presented to the City of Loveland by the Ramsey Paxton Cemetery Association, and the wood is actually from a cherry tree that was taken down from the cemetery. I would not do as well waxing poetic, Mr. Kennedy, about what Mr. Geiger had to say about you, but the entire speech was about you and how much you have done to help this association get that cemetery cleaned up, and that anything they asked for, you were there and ready to help. So you may put that where you think
thanks.
appropriate. That is yours. Almost. I'm working on it. Let's see. On April 30th was the annual litter cleanup. Thank you to Gary Benesh and everyone that helped with that. There were apparently 43 volunteers that collected 43 full trash bags, plus lots of miscellaneous items. They list everywhere they cleaned up all over the city. So thank you to all those volunteers and everything that they did on April 30th. Good. I believe that May 11th, starting tomorrow through the 17th, is National Police Week. Is that correct? Dedicated to honoring America's law enforcement community, especially those who have given their lives in the line of duty. So we will be thinking of our law enforcement officers this week and give them a special thought yourselves. Upcoming events. Let's see. The city is accepting applications for Loveland U. Participants meet once a week from September 7th to October 9th. To learn more about the city, its history, the schools, and the community, applications are available on the city's website and are due by June 1st. The Little Miami River Chambers Food Truck Rally is this Saturday. Is it 3 to 10 at Shoppers Haven? Also on Saturday, the Loveland Athletic Boosters are hosting a craft show from 10 to 4 at Loveland Primary School. The Little Miami River Chambers third Thursday concert series will begin on May 19th. It'll be from 6 to 9 on the patio of Hometown Cafe and will feature the band Low Country Boil. That sounds good. The city's first concert in the park in our Nisbet is scheduled for May 22nd and will feature the Harmonics, a local band. Concert will be held from 6 to 8, so join us for that, please. I think that's all I have for my announcement. Does anybody have anything else? There can't possibly be anything else. Okay. I believe we have a motion for executive session. Would someone care to make that motion?
I'll move for executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22G2 to consider the purchase of property.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
We are back at 8:38. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Blair?
Yep.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Motion carries.